All right, so here is the secret to making your ideas more memorable. And this is critical because if you have an idea that you want to transform the world or you want to influence the behavior of other people, it's imperative that that idea is sticky, that it stays with that individual beyond the point of contact. If I share with you this amazing framework, this amazing idea, and you're sitting here and you're eating it up, and you're like, yeah, that's great. I love this. This is going to change everything. But then you immediately go home and you have the opportunity to implement that idea. But then you can't quite remember what we talked about. You're like, is something about this or something about that? It was great. I loved it. But what exactly? I can't remember it, right? That's not going to help anybody. And so one of the things that we can do to make our ideas more viral, to make them more memorable, is to focus on making them sticky. And this came up because Anuj was sitting in on a coaching call that I had with a client last week. And I guess I'm maniacal about whenever there's an idea or a framework or something that we're trying to communicate to other people, to ask ourselves, what is the stickiest way to frame this so that it's not just a great idea that goes in one ear and out the other, but it's something that stays with them so that in the moment, in the point of battle, when they have the opportunity to deploy the idea, it comes to mind and they can do it. And this is surprisingly difficult because you have to want to put the time and energy, not just into having the great idea, but into packaging it in a way that somebody can take it, they can put it in their pocket, and then they can pull it out. And this reminds me of the simple truth, which is that for most of us, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, right? If you've ever heard this idea that like, you don't need to go consume more information. The collection of knowledge isn't the thing that's limiting you. It's the execution of the knowledge you already have. And truthfully, you've probably already solved the problem that's in front of you somewhere in the past, somewhere in the information you've gathered in prior years or in previous experiences. You just don't recall that solution in this particular context. Now, that could be for all sorts of reasons. It could be because maybe they look slightly different. The context before looks slightly different than this context. For instance, maybe you went through a terrible breakup with a girlfriend back when you were in your early 20s. She broke your heart, she destroyed it, she cheated on you, she did all this stuff. And after the fact, you saw all the signs. You could be like, oh man, yeah, it was so obvious. This was a terrible toxic relationship. I didn't see it coming, right? And you learned a lesson in that. And then later in life, let's say 10, 12 years later, you get into a business partnership. And then that person behaves very similarly. And they do the same thing and they cheat on you and they take advantage of you and they betray you. And then you look back and you go, oh my God, it's the same thing that I learned before with the girlfriend. Why didn't I connect the pieces? Well, you already knew the thing. You didn't need to be taught something new. You just needed to be reminded of what you already knew. And so whenever you have these big impactful lessons or these big impactful ideas, I like to sit down and try to figure out, how do I package this so that it's top of mind? It's an easy mental hook for me to pull out later. And that's the beauty of mental models, is that mental models are this lattice work upon which we can place our ideas. And then later we can pull them off the shelf really quickly and easily and say, let's use this one for this situation. And sometimes you pull the mental model off the shelf or the idea, and you're like, yeah, I thought this was the right idea for this situation, but it turns out it's not. But it did inspire me to go down this other rabbit hole and pull this other one off. So if you want your ideas to be more memorable, more sticky, then focus on distilling it down to its fewest points, right? The fewest actionable lessons from that instance. Try to get it down to 3 if you can. That's the ideal. 5 is okay. Beyond 5 lessons or 5 integrated parts within an idea, it gets too complicated for most people. So break it into 3s. If you have something that had 9 different lessons, 9 different ideas, break it into 3s. So three, like a section of 3, 3, 3, right? That's how you can do that. And then figure out a visual representation of that idea. This is really critical. This is part of a framework that I actually teach called the Framework Forge. So this is something I teach my students, which is how to actually visualize a framework or an idea or training for people. Because if I can take this idea, these 3 ideas, and then I put them into a triangle, you're more likely to remember the triangle than you are the 3 distinct points. And then you can kind of work your way back into what were the individual lessons from that. If you have 4 ideas, you can make a square, right? You can make a matrix. If you have more of like a do this, then that, then this other thing, you can create a roadmap, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can simplify simplify the visual representation of this activity or this idea so that somebody else, when you draw it out on a napkin, goes, that's amazing. You're like, yeah, it is really amazing. All I did was put this idea to a shape. Crazy. Third thing, or the last thing rather, is to just name the thing. Give your framework, give your idea an actual name. Give it something really intriguing and powerful. So like the framework forge, you guys remember how I told you I actually teach this framework of how to create frameworks. It's called the framework forge. You frame or you forge frameworks in this framework. So that's how you give somebody the handle through which to hold the container, which is the idea. And that's really really important, because without that handle, they just have this idea sitting in their hands. But if we can package it with the name, now they can pull it out later and they can be like, hey, what was that thing about the framework forge? Oh yeah, there's something about shapes. I need to keep it simple. Okay, cool. And now you're off to the races. And that's so critical, because in the battles of life, you're going to be in the heat of the moment, and you're not going to be able to sit there and pull from your memory this really convoluted, complex idea. You have to look no further for that than the fact that, like, when you're trying to quote somebody, you're often like butchering the quote. You're getting the essence of the idea across, not the exactitude of, or the specific exactness of the idea. And so that's what the Framework Forge allows you to do. Give it a name, put it to a shape, give only 3 to 5 different bullet points within that, and you have given enough of the essence of the lesson that you can pull it off of your mental model shelf later and use it. And that, my friends, is how you make your ideas more memorable. I'll see you in the next episode.